Hello everyone, welcome to another YouTube video. In this video, we will actually start programming and we will learn the basics of Python. So before we start programming, we need to know the difference between an interpreter and a compiler. As far as the programming languages have been classified, based on the execution, there are only two types of programming language. One that's being compiled and one that's being interpreted dynamically. So an example of a compiled language would be a C++ and an example for an interpreted language would be Python. So I have a basic example pulled up over here. You don't need to worry about the syntaxes. You'll only be looking at Python in this video. You don't need to worry about the C++. The major difference with this example is to show you the difference between a compiler and an interpreter. The major difference between a compiler and interpreter is that a compiler compiles your code into a binary file called .exe. So it wouldn't execute the program line by line. Instead, it would just read the entire file, compile it, convert it to a .exe file which contains the binary and the assembly language, and we have to run that .exe file to execute our program. So I'll show you how this works, how a compiler works. So to compile this program, I'll use a compiler called G++. You don't need to worry about anything of this. We will not be talking about C++, we will not be talking about Python, so you don't need to worry about this. I'm just showing you an example. So the program is compiling, the program is being compiled. What a compiler does is that it converts your program into a binary file called .exe, where this is being converted to an assembly language called assembly. So if you look at my desktop, there's a file created called A, which actually contains the binary. To run our program, we need to execute this file. So I'll go back here and I'll type a.exe. So this will print the word hello world to my console. This is how a compiler works. But an interpreter, on the other hand, interprets your code line by line. Instead of compiling it to a .exe file and putting the binaries, it actually runs your code line by line, reading line by line. Instead, it wouldn't produce a.exe file or any exe file. It will just run dynamically. So I'll show you how this works. I'll just delete this file so that you can see the difference, a.exe, and I also delete this C++ file which I don't need anymore. So if you see here, if you see here, I'm going to run this program. Just prints hello world to the console. See, it just prints hello world to your console, and it didn't create any .exe file over here. So Python is an interpreted language, it doesn't create any .exe file. So I think that's the basics of a compiler and interpreter. I think I explained it good. If you have any doubts, please leave it in the comments below. I'll try to answer them. So now, before programming in Python, we need some kind of an IDE where we can write our code. So in this tutorial series, I'll be using Visual Studio Code, which is made by Microsoft and maintained by Microsoft. So to download that, open up your browser, any browser, and go to this link. I have linked this in my description box. If you want it, go check my description box. After going to this link, it will look something like this. You need to click on this button, download for Windows. After clicking on that, all other steps are explanatory. If you have any doubts, look into this called the docs, where you can know how to download this. Okay, now I assume that you have downloaded Visual Studio Code. So before we write some code in Visual Studio, I'll show you where we will be running our Python code. So we'll actually be running it in our console. So this is a console. This is a console, and this is how a console looks. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. And the old black and white screen is coming back. So we'll actually be running our code in this console, executing our code in this console. So the future of a Python is that you can run it in real time. If you are working with C++, if you have to run your file, you have to compile it and then run it, and then run the .exe file. So it will take a lot of time, and you cannot run it in real time. But if you are using Python, you can program it in real time, instruction by instruction typing in real time. So I'll show you how to run Python in your console. So to go into the Python mode, you just type Python in your console and press enter. And after typing Python, you can actually write some Python code. So in this video, we'll only be talking about this command called print, which just prints a text to your console. So if I want to print a text called hello world to the console, I need to use a statement called print, which actually prints the word statement inside the parentheses to the console. I'll show you how this works with an example. So if I want to print something to my console, I'll just say print open bracket close bracket. Whenever you open a bracket, you obviously need to close a bracket in programming. And to pass in a string, we use this double quotes. Just stay with me here. I'll explain how this double quote works in my next video. But if you want to pass in a text to the print command, you need these double quotes. Only then it will work, or else it would throw an error. I'll type in the text which I need to print to the console. In our case, we need to print hello world. So I'll type hello world inside these quotes. And that's it. That's our first program. If we press enter, it would just print hello world to our console. Let's see. See, it just printed hello world to our console. So previously I told you that we need this double quotes if we are passing in a text as input to this print function, and if the quotes are missing, it would just throw an error. So I'll show you what would happen if we don't have the quotes over there. This is the same thing as the above, but instead of this, I have removed this quotes over here, so there's no quotes here. So if I press enter, it will throw an error. Name hello is not defined. So what this says is that there's nothing called as hello, and it just throws an error. So if you want to print a text, you need those double quotes. If you don't have a double quotes, then it will throw an error like this: name error, name hello is not defined. So this is how you run Python program in your console in real time. But most of the time you wouldn't want it to run in real time, because once you run this and you exit out of it, and if you close this, the program is gone. You cannot recover it. You cannot save it anywhere. That's something which you don't want to. You need to save it somewhere in your desktop or in your downloads folder. So you wouldn't be running this. You wouldn't be mostly using your console as a real-time programming console. But instead you will be typing it in somewhere in a file, which after you will execute it using the Python interpreter. So I'll just close this. I assume that you have downloaded VS Code. So after downloading VS Code and before starting to program in Python, we need to go to the marketplace called this, which is over here with these squares. In this marketplace, we need to download the Python extension. VS Code on itself is very lightweight and comes with a lot of without any features. To be honest, we need to download something called as the extension for our specific language, so that we can get debugger, linting, and etc. I'll talk more about that in my future videos. Don't worry about that terms. So you need to download the Python extension. To download, just type Python in the search bar. If you type in here, it will take a moment and it will show you this one, which is an official one by Microsoft. You need to install it. There will be a button over here called install. You need to click on it. After installing, it will show you something like this. You can close this safely because you have installed it. And now I'll create a folder called tutorial. Actually, there is a new way of creating folders, but if you want to know how you create folders in the old way, just type cmd, go to your desktop, make the tutorial, and that's how you create a folder using a command prompt. But you can also create it by right clicking and new. There are two ways of creating it. It's up to you how you want to create it. I'll just create it with my console. So it just creates a folder called tutorial, and I don't need this new folder anymore. So how this VS Code works really works is that you just open up a folder in VS Code and you can put your program inside that. VS Code just works by using a folder. You need to put in a folder or open a folder in VS Code so that you can put some files into your folder and you can run it. In my case, I need to open a folder. I'll just click on open folder and tutorial. This will open the folder in VS Code, and this might take a moment. It's reloading VS Code. And that's how you open a folder in VS Code. Now that we have opened a folder in VS Code, the folder is empty. There's nothing inside the folder. We need to create a new file so that there's something in the folder and we can run it. To create a new file, there's icon over here. I'll click on it, new file, and in this we'll just print hello world to a console. So I'll just say print, And always notice that the Python file always ends with a .py extension. You must note this. If you don't put a .py at the end of your file, it wouldn't Python interpreter wouldn't assume it is a Python file and would throw an error. So always the file which you're using and it's a Python file always ends with a .py extension. So I put a .py at the end of print. And as you can see, as soon as I put .py, it recognizes vscode recognizes it is a Python file, so it puts the logo over here, Python logo. So after clicking enter, you'll have the new file created in your directory and it opens the new file. So now I told you we can print something to your console using the print statement. We were writing it in the console, but now we are going to write it in the Python file. The syntax is the same. You just type in print, open bracket, and the closing bracket was automatically created by vscode, and that's because of the extension which we downloaded. If just watch for the codes. If I put a single code, it would automatically create the other code for me because of the extension which we downloaded, the Python extension. Inside this double quotes, I will type hello world. Now we have wrote a simple hello world program into our Python file. Now how do you run this? There are actually two ways of running this. One, you can open an internal console or terminal inside VS Code by going to terminal, a new terminal, which would actually open up a new terminal inside your VS Code. You can run this manually by saying Python and print .py. If you run this, it would just print hello world to your console. See, just printed hello world, and this is how you run Python code which is inside a file. So what actually happened is that when you just type Python, it would open a console where you can type Python code in real time. But if we just pass in the file name, it would Python interpreter would just look into the file and it would execute the code line by line. In this case, you have only one line, so it executed this code. So I told you there are two ways of running a Python code in VS Code. So one way is to open a internal terminal and run manually by typing python print.py, and the other way is to click on this icon over here, the run code icon. If you click on it, it would run automatically for you in your output bar. This way the output, it got redirected to the output by itself, and as you can see, it just got executed by itself. It just got executed by itself. We don't need to type Python and everything, every other stuff. So most of the time I'll be using this, using the output as my. Most of the time I'll be using this thing to this icon, run code icon, to run my code. But when it comes to take input, I'll use my terminal. So I just wanted to show you that there are two ways of running code in your VS Code. One is to use terminal and one is to click on this thing. And that's how you run program, in VS Code, and that was a basic example of how to use Python. In this we printed hello world, and there's one more thing which I need to show you. One more thing. So if you type in a \n, backslashes always have a special value in programming. So if I say \n and I execute this code, it's taking a moment. I'm out of the quotes. So always note that if you're typing any text in you need to be inside the quotes. If you go outside the quotes, it'll just throw up an error. So that was the error which it throw here. Syntax error and unexpected character after line continuation. That basically means that you are outside the quotes and you are trying to use a text method. So I'll just type a \n here, and if you run this, you can see it added two new lines. One over here and one over here. If you remove this, there will be only one line. There will be only one new line added. So can you see the difference? There are two lines added here and there is only one line added here. So what the \n basically means is that if you put in a \n inside your text, it basically means that Python just print it in the next line. Don't continue in the same line. Just use the next line to to print the statement. So that's what happened when I put the \n here. It just just printed a new line, and that's why we have two new lines and only one new line in the next program where we remove the \n. So if I put this \n inside somewhere of my text, like after hello comma, if I put \n, just watch what happens. It actually printed hello and world in a separate line, and that's how a \n works in a print statement. And there's one more thing in this. One more thing, if you remove this backslash n and run it normally, you just print hello world and it would add a new line automatically. So the print statement has this function of adding backslash n automatically to the end of your line. So if this is the end of the line, print statement would basically add backslash n automatically, so that a new line always happens here. So if you don't want a new line, what you can do is there's a variable inside this called end. Thus you can see the on time documentation is there because of the Python extension which we downloaded. So this end, so you can see that the end actually has a backslash n. So what this end does is that whatever you pass into the end actually adds it to the end of your text. So in our case, the end has backslash n, so it adds backslash n to the end of our text. So if you don't want a backslash n to your end of your text, what you can do is you can say end equals empty string. So what this does is that it adds an empty string to your original text. If I run this, there's no new line created. See, there's no new line created. So what this end basically does is that it adds a new string to the end of your string. So Python automatically adds a backslash n to this end. So what happens is that backslash n to this end. So this backslash n gets attached to your original text. So you get a new line for free. If you don't want a new line, you can just remove this backslash n in the end, so that just prints n. It doesn't print anything. To show you that this end, the string passed to this end actually gets added to the last of your text, I can just print exclamatory mark, and what would you expect is that to have an exclamatory mark after this D. So let's try to execute this. So as you can see, whatever was passed into this end got added at the end of your text. So Python automatically adds backslash n. If you don't like it, you can override it using this end and passing this end to your print statement and an empty string. So that's it for this video. If you have any doubts or questions, please post it in the comments. I'll try to answer your questions. Please subscribe if you like the video. Hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Stay tuned till the next video.